the regular February 12th, 2024 meeting of the Morris Plains Planning Board. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hereby announce that this meeting is being held in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Open Public Meeting Act. Proper notice of meeting dates has been given to the Morris Newsbee and the Morris County Daily Record and posted on the bulletin board in the Borough Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ogumbo. Mr. Garbaglia.
Present.
Mrs. Kelly.
Present.
Mrs. Decker.
Present.
I'm sorry. I cut from Brooklyn. Mrs. McCluskey.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Bezel. Mayor Carr.
Present.
And Mr. Drutzler.
Present.
Okay, are there any comments from the public on matters that are not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We'll have correspondence and bills. Karen, do we have any correspondence?
We have no correspondence.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, you wanna do the bills, please?
Move the following invoices for approval for payment. We have vendor is Phillips Price and
Excuse me,
Gregel
Mr. Kelly, you gotta talk into this.
Talking to the mic.
I'm sorry.
for $800 for planning general. And the purchase order number is 202-40163. Invoice for New Jersey planning officials for $95. It's mandatory training. Purchase order is number 202-40167. Another one for New Jersey planning officials. It's for $190, mandatory training. Purchase order number is 202-40168. Invoice from Anderson and Denzler for $283.50. Professional services, the purchase order is number 202-40281. Invoice from Mariziti and Falcone LLP for $1,890. Legal services, purchase order number 202-40286. That completes it.
Do we have a second? Second. Roll call, please.
May I ask who seconded that?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Garbaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly. Mrs. Decker. Mrs. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mayor Carr.
Yes.
And Mr. Drutzler.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go to the approval of the minutes. We'll do the January 15th reorganization meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
Okay, before we start, I would like to mention that on the first page, it's not Leon Hall no any longer, it's William Ryden, and that'll also be in the February minutes, January special meeting also. Okay.
Are there any other
It's a
corrections?
sad day when we eliminate Leon Hall, that's all I can say.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's like the mob though, Frank, he just keeps coming back.
This might be it, though.
Okay, so no, are there any other corrections or additions to the reorganization meeting minutes? Could we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion is carried, those are approved. And now we have the planning board regular meeting minutes for January 15th, 2024. Are there any corrections or additions to that?
Yes, there is a correction.
Okay,
On the very top, it says January 12th, 2023. Should be January 15th, 2024.
Okay, well,
where are we, Frank?
On the very top of those minutes.
Oh,
yes, right. Okay. Okay.
any other corrections or additions? A motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we'll do the minutes of the January 29th,
Okay.
20,
I have a correction on those minutes.
okay, just a moment.
Okay.
29th, 2024, this was the special planning board meeting.
Okay, Ms. Stecker, when she, was listening to the tape, it's on page 290, paragraph 9. Mr. Hall asked if buildings B, it should be building through H, will have rooftop mechanical equipment, not just B.
B through H?
Yeah.
B through H.
Are there any other corrections or additions? Do we have a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Second?
Second with the corrections?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Now we will move on to the application PB 4-23, 1625 Route 10, LLC. When we finished our last meeting, and before we get started, we're gonna have to go, we'll go till 10.
Fine.
Maybe we'll be done before then, I don't know,
I
but.
won't argue with you about that.
When we finished up the last meeting, Mr. Hall had a lot of questions. So I think, can we pick up there?
If I can just jump in, Tom Allen for the record on behalf of the applicant. Hereby, Mr. Hall will get his chance to ask questions, but we were asked by Mr. Walsh to prepare an exhibit about the entryway and the site distance, so we prepared that. So I think if you put that on first, let Mr. Keller go through that.
Okay.
And then obviously questions for anybody who
Sure.
wants to ask. So I'm gonna recall Mr. Keller, I think, for the record, we're up to A18, does that sound right to you?
Yep.
Right.
And this will be an exhibit of the proposed entrance for Route 10. Really focusing on site distance.
Mark this. A18 of today's
No, he's canceling it.
date,
Thank you.
Correct. The 12th.
12th.
Recall the issue for the board, if you remember, was the possible queuing and the pedestrians crossing at that location within the site, and would there be any conflict with this?
Certainly, Mr. Maltz had raised a concern or a question as to whether a pedestrian crossing from building F to building E or vice versa, using the crosswalk across the right in, right out driveway off of Route 10, would there be sufficient sight distance for an incoming motorist to see that person crossing? So Exhibit A18 is entitled Highway Entrance Rendering, Highline Marketplace. It is dated 2/9/24. Our office has prepared 3D models of portions of the site. And one of the things that we have done, which helps address the concern Mr. Maltz had raised, is the plaza area at the east end of building F has been changed from what is currently, or what is on the site plans that was submitted to you. We have shrunk the size of that. When we did our site plans, we had not started programming all these plaza areas. So we wanted to be conservative and have a larger amount of impervious, because we could always shrink it and our stormwater would still work. So as a program that we've shrunk that outdoor space. And what this shows is, I'm coming in off of Route 10, standing here, making, I'm sorry, Carol. I'm coming in off of Route 10, this is building F on the right, building E on the left, and in the background, you can see the crosswalk. And standing here, you can see that there is a clear line of sight to that crosswalk. And there is sufficient time for the speed of vehicles entering the site. They need 155 feet in which to stop, and that's on a wet road. So there is plenty of sight distance available for an entering vehicle.
What is that distance there?
Well, that's gonna be on my next exhibit.
This is the A19.
I wanted to start with this because I think pictures are worth 1,000 words. I mean, this clearly shows that you can see from Route 10 coming into the site.
There was talk about a wall, and you couldn't see over the wall, there's no wall there.
We took it out. That was part of the reprogramming of that plaza area. We had, Mr. Maltz asked us to look at two things. One is a pedestrian crossing and a car stopping. That, the wall that we have on the site plans did not impact on that. But if that car is stopped and somebody comes in right behind them, there was a little less than 155 feet. I don't know exactly what it was, but we would have had an issue with that wall. So in discussing it, I talked to my landscape architecture team, and they said, oh, we made that plaza much smaller. I said, well, that helps me. And, you know, so we've updated the plan, and this is Exhibit A19.
For revised plaza.
This is called Sightline Exhibit. It also happens to show the revised plaza at Building F. So A19 with today's date is entitled Sightline Exhibit. It is dated today. And there's two sight lines provided. The top one is, actually, let me start with the bottom one. The bottom one really represents what's on Exhibit A18 of a vehicle entering the site to see a pedestrian in the crosswalk. And we have about 200 feet of sight distance available. Now, if you go to the top exhibit, that is, at what point is a second vehicle able to see the first vehicle that stopped waiting for a pedestrian to cross? And that 155 feet is almost to the end of the ramp coming in off of Route 10. So we have probably about 170 feet of sight distance. And as more, should there be more than two cars, at that point, you're back far enough and that retaining wall no longer becomes a impediment to the sight lines. So, and on the right-hand side is the profile to show that there is no grading that impedes on the sight lines, which is what you can visually see in Exhibit A18. And we will make sure that any plantings we do put along the curb line, if we do, would be low growing, they'd be just ground cover. And anything larger would be up against the wall. You know, our intent would be to kind of buffer the view of the end of the wall coming to the building F. So I think that, I hope, addresses Mr. Maltz's comments.
Questions
Yes.
about that?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes, I received by email today, those plans. I received the full size, had an opportunity to look at them. In talking to Mr. Keller tonight, he did note that where the wall was before, in fact, by suspicion that there might have been a sightline obstruction, I was correct on one of the exhibits. So the fact that that plaza is being pulled back, was a benefit, to providing adequate sight. I also looked at the, Asheville roadway design standards regarding the, related to the radii that are being used when you make the right turn off of, Route 10. They come into a 50-foot radius, compound with a 95, and then 200 at the end before you, as you go into the tangent on the road that goes through the center of the site. The 95, I consider the critical one, and based on the standards, that's a 20 to 25 mile an hour, speed curve. And they adequately meet at least 25 miles an hour stopping sight distance with the revision. And so I'm satisfied with that, and the profile that they drew also shows that it's adequate. As I discussed with Mr. Keller, and it was apparent from the exhibit, the three-dimensional one, when they showed the vegetation on the corner, as he pointed out, I mentioned to him, just to be on the safe side, you don't wanna plant anything that's gonna be in the closest part of that line of sight, or that sight distance, to the, corner there. So whatever vegetation goes in should be low and non-obstructing. But otherwise, I'm satisfied with, what he's presented.
Okay. Do any of you
I just have a
Sure,
clarification.
absolutely.
Sorry, Mr. Keller,
Yes.
can you explain, I get that the top one is showing what happens if there's a car waiting at the crosswalk, and the bottom one is if there's a pedestrian, but why are they both 155 feet?
Because that's the stopping sight distance associated with 25 miles an hour.
So it's the same for both?
Correct.
Okay.
It's assuming that the vehicle entering off of Route 10 is traveling at no more than 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
Which is based on based upon what Mr. Waltz just testified to, is the speed associated with the horizontal curvature of the road.
No, I thought your testimony was that with the pedestrian, it was like close to 200, that's what I thought you said.
Well, it is from all the way out at Route 10, so it exceeds 155.
Okay.
But the profile is only for 155 because that's the minimum required.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Anything else on that?
Any questions?
Yeah. Eric, is this really gonna be posted 25 miles an hour? Because when you come off of Route 10, are you going to be going 25 miles per hour?
If you're entering into a site, I don't know that we could post it. I mean, it would be an advisory speed plate, with a curve, warning sign. But it is the safe speed associated with the curvature of the road. And that's why I also want to clarify is that stopping sight distance that we used out of AASHTO is based on wet roadway conditions. You know, theoretically, you could maybe go a little faster if you were on a dry road, but you could also stop faster because there's greater friction between your tires and the pavement. So this is what we designed to. We can sign it, but I don't think it's necessary.
So let me clarify, Harold, you just said that the curvature of the road makes you do 25,
No,
indicative
it's-
of doing 25
The radii that's proposed, the
Right.
center one,
Yeah.
is 95 feet, which fits in AASHTO, it falls between 20 and 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
Okay, also, the ramp turnout is on an upgrade, so you decelerate a little more because you're on an upgrade. In terms of what Leon was suggesting for an advisory speed, like a ramp speed, this isn't a ramp from a highway onto, for example, when I come west on 10, when I come here and I get off at 53, you've got an actual highway ramp to come down to, the intersection of Signal. This is a turnout for a driveway, so there's no need to post you wouldn't post an advisory warning sign of the ramp speed. It's not a formal highway ramp, this is a channelized driveway.
Eric, in your exhibit A18, you do not show a retaining wall next to building F, correct?
No, we do. It's just a little hard to see.
I guess I'm confused.
If you look very carefully behind the, I'm sorry, Harold, behind the shrubs, between the corner of building F and the tree, that white shading in there
Yeah, I see.
is a retaining wall.
My only comment is the landscaping in this exhibit A18. It's gonna have to be revised very clearly on the landscaping plan, that all these shrubs and ground cover would sure height of a foot or less.
We can do that.
Yeah.
And remember, we're gonna come back
Right.
for final on every other building besides building A. We'll be back.
Also too.
Leon may not be back, but I'll be back, God willing.
I won't be here. Also, those two trees that you show in
Yes.
exhibit A18, again, I would note those on the landscaping plan to be subject to, field location, by the borough engineer. Like when I look at that, I don't know if those two trees and that purple shrub that you show on A18 possibly, obscure the view of a pedestrian about to enter that crosswalk. Not crystal clear to me. And this is so important that those two trees, I see that purple shrub you showed? Yeah.
Up here,
Yeah.
that's up on the,
In other words, this whole corner, I think, should be subject to field verification, at the time of planting, and all the shrubs and ground cover less than a foot.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I think that's appropriate. It's nice to show it in here, but you gotta, that's fine.
Now, you may not know this yet, in terms of your DOT application, you're not showing a deceleration lane along Route 10 eastbound, are you?
Now, there's an existing shoulder there,
Yep.
so, but I'm still waiting for comments.
Anyone on the board have any questions, any more questions of Mr. Waltz? Anyone from the public have any questions of Mr. Keller's and Mr. Waltz's comments? No? Okay, then we
Then
can,
it's fair game. Who wants to ask questions about last month's or last 2 weeks ago testimony's fine. We're here. In fact, Mr. Dietz is here as well. If there are questions of Mr. Dietz, your colleague testified last time. He was basically done, but he's still here in case questions come up.
Leon, you have your questions?
Sure. Eric, could you put up exhibit A9, please?
A9. Remember what it is?
It looks like this.
That's Chuck.
No, I do not have a question, I do not have a question for you.
You just want that exhibit?
I want that exhibit.
I'm glad I asked, I'd be looking through my bag and going. I didn't do it.
Okay, the main entrance drive from 202 to your site, you're not proposing any pavement replacement, no milling, no nothing, correct?
Our plans don't show it, we've discussed it. Mr. Hall and I had a discussion last week, so that I can hopefully be prepared for tonight. And I discussed it, with my clients, with the applicant, and within the framework of the shared access easement between the Weichert property and the Stop and Shop property, those improvements will be undertaken.
So you'll mill and top course pave that entire driveway, from that joint just behind that island on Route 202? Cause that driveway out there is shot,
Yeah,
there's massive sinkholes,
So
center
like
line
the
joints
stop bar
opened up.
across, right?
What's it?
You're talking from the stop bar straight across about?
Approximately the stop bars.
from here
Yeah.
back.
There's actually two joints in your exhibit, there's one right at that island, and then on the left side of the road.
There's,
Right there.
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
I have a feeling that was probably when they repaved Littleton Road and the county went partway into the driveway. We can do that.
Okay, great, thanks. Regarding the driveway proposed for phase one only that goes out to Johnson Road where you open up those islands, I don't know if we talked about this or not.
We did, yes.
About what's the treatment of that driveway?
We're going to, at a minimum, because remember, that.
We should put up that exhibit.
Yeah.
It's your lucky day.
What number is that, Eric?
Exhibit A3, dated January 15th, 24.
Okay.
So, this is the phase one site plan. We're removing the north-south islands where they cut through. What we'd like to do, because this area is where building B is and the driveway's gonna get, at a minimum, we're agreeable to patching, filling the potholes so that it's a decent wearing surface. If necessary to create a decent wearing surface, we'll mill and resurface that driveway. I'm only hesitating in the sense of if they come back right away with another building phase, then, you know, it's money that is going out, down the drain.
So I assume by then, this will be just prior to CO, that the applicant would have a good idea as to when and if he's gonna pull the trigger on phase two.
Right, cause I mean, obviously, when this is under construction, we're gonna have trucks running in and everything else. We're gonna have to go back, it's possible that we have to go back and fix some other things because of the truck traffic. But that would be before CO, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
you're
reasonable.
amenable to patching, repairing at a minimum, and at a maximum, a 2-inch mill of pave,
Yes, sir,
prior to a CO for phase one.
correct.
Now, on your demolition plan, I call it, it's your sheet 4,
Yes,
there's a note there, note number 7, and it basically says that wherever possible, the applicant wants to keep the existing pavement and just do a surface mill. I personally think every square foot of pavement on this site is shot, and I think all the pavement, full depth, throughout the entire site should be removed and replaced. So that note, in my opinion, needs to go. Just drive around that site and look at the pavement. It's 40, 50 years old, and it's gone.
that was me.
Two end tables today.
That's fine. I mean, we put it in there, again, solely for if there are areas that we can preserve and just mill and overlay, but that's fine, we'll take it out.
And again, you may have testified to this, I just don't recall, but I just want to confirm. The self-storage is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation?
Generally, I mean, that's gonna depend on the operator, but generally, they are not 24/7. They do restrict access after some period at night, and, I don't know what, everyone's a little different. But it would not, you can't show up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go into your unit. the building's locked.
That would be a phase two.
Yeah, that would be,
Yeah. When we come back to that building eventually, we can deal with the operator, the hours of operation, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I understand, but you are getting preliminary for the entire site, so, but you're right, if you need to amend the preliminary based on, you get a specific operator that has certain needs, then we'll deal with it.
Correct.
I just thought maybe the applicant knew, or has a desire in terms of hours of operation and access.
it's all driven by the operator,
Okay.
but, you know, they generally limit that.
Last meeting or the meeting before, we talked about the sidewalk connection to Signature Place as part of phase two or some other future phase.
The one that goes through the wooded area,
Correct.
yes.
Can we add that to the preliminary site plan for the entire tract?
We can show an approximate location for that.
And
yes.
again, it could be cleaned up and modified as part of any final
Yeah.
in the future.
Correct, we've committed to use best efforts to connect with the folks next door and do this.
But it should be shown on the
Yeah,
preliminary.
we have to negotiate with Veris Residential,
Right.
you know, on the specifics of that.
Do you know, or does the applicant know, how many children would typically attend a 10,000 square foot daycare center?
It depends somewhat on the age of the children, but that type of child care center has a maximum occupancy of 150 to 160 children. Again, it depends on how the rooms are laid out. You know, the more toddlers, the higher the square footage per student is. So, but that is a reasonable approximation of what it would be for that 10,000 square feet.
Eric,
Yes,
did you say 150 to 160?
yeah, for 10,000 square feet.
Under your phase one only, did you break out your soil disturbance permits separately for that? I just don't recall.
No, the soil disturbance is for the whole site.
Right, but in terms of phase one only, you don't know if there's an import or export, or you just don't know?
We did not
Okay.
break it down that way.
All right, so again, we can handle that under the soil disturbance for the entire tract under preliminary. And depending on how much of those numbers you eat up for phase one, you might have to modify the soil disturbance for future phases.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Last meeting or the meeting before, there was a discussion about the dumpster enclosure. And I just wanna go over that again so we're all on the same page. The borough's gone to a detail where it's a full brick veneer masonry with a nice attractive capstone. So that's gonna be a revision to your dumpster detail.
Okay. Our details, I remember you bringing it up, I think it was when Mr. Dietz was testifying. Our detail does show a brick facade on it.
Is it full brick or just a brick veneer?
That I don't know. That should be a full brick. Instead of me leafing through sheets here, we'll agree
Agree to that.
that it's a
In
full
lieu of
brick.
a thin brick, because the rest of the job is all thin brick. It's gonna have a block wall behind it.
Yeah.
Understood. I'll defer to the board if they're comfortable with me making, or Bill making that decision on later date, that's fine. But,
That way we can match the bricketry thing.
They make it in both, we're not gonna have an order for full bed depth brick on the job.
Excuse me, sir, you're gonna have to come
For
up
the record,
with.
that's Mr. Dietz.
If we did full brick, that would be the only full brick on this job site that we'd have to order. I'm just trying to avoid doing it, but it's the same brick. They cut it in the factory from real brick to make the thin brick. So we'll have a full 8-inch solid masonry block wall behind it, which is gonna take the brunt of any force the truck hits it.
So it's gonna match the brick of the building?
Yeah, we'll pick one of the 4 brick colors, probably the main one that's on the 225 in the building C. that's the main brick color for the center, we can put that on there. So
Hey,
it's
can you
real
describe-
brick, it's just cutting the factory thin.
Can you describe the gate again, please?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Well, wait, why do we require full brick? If-
That's something this board has instituted about 5 to 10 years ago, starting down here at Investors Savings Bank.
Right,
If you go look at, City MD, they have a full brick enclosure.
okay, so because it's more sturdy, it can take the brunt of maybe a truck hitting it that more
Well, it's
than-
both for structural and just aesthetics, how it looks.
If a truck hits the dumpster, whether it's thin brick or full brick, it'll break the brick. So that should be more easily repaired if we use the thin brick. Again, it's real brick, right? So it comes as a full brick, we order it as a thin brick because they cut it in the factory. But it's clayed and fired.
You're not talking about much of a
No.
useful brick here, I mean.
But if anything's gonna take the brunt, the bollards and the solid block wall that sits behind it, 'cause we fill the cells solid with concrete and rebar. So that's what's gonna take any brunt of an accidental hit if they hit it with a dumpster as they pick it up or bring it back down.
Most likely it's on the inside, we don't put veneer on the inside of the dumpster. And most of the dumpsters, it would be pretty difficult to hit the outside of it because of where they're placed. We are currently showing for the gates, the frame is 2-inch galvanized steel tube, with a cedar slats, 1x4 cedar slats attached to the frame.
I would suggest, again, like City MD and other recent site plans, we've been requiring heavy plastic boards that weather forever on a steel frame as opposed to any type of wood slats, because wood will deteriorate and it breaks easier than these heavy plastic slats. Plus, they're more attractive.
And it's something that keeps the doors closed as well, because the garbage guys, they dump it and then the doors are left open. Somehow retractable if we had a little bit,
We have some simulated wood on the facade, so if you'd like, because it's composite material, so it doesn't rot. If you want, we could propose that on there as well, so it looks like wood with a composite, and it won't rot, and it won't be infested by bugs that can't eat through it.
I think last meeting we discussed the EV parking spaces.
Leon, let's just get back to the doors for a second.
I'm sorry.
Just something to keep the doors closed, but they don't latch them back all the time and then they fly open again. Trouble over here across the street where Seppi's was and whatnot, with the doors being left open and then that causes a problem as well, so.
I mean,
There's some sort of, they'll open a gate and then when they close it, they don't latch it, but is there something that, keeps the gates closed?
well, our details show, pins on on each of the gates. And then there's a receiving sleeve in the concrete.
Yeah.
So that
But
goes
the
in.
guy has to do that.
Hmm?
The driver has to do that.
Yes, or the maintenance crew has to come around. I'm not sure having a full-size gate have a automatic close mechanism, because that's gonna close on the truck, and the truck.
No, the driver would have to close it, but instead of putting the pins in the ground like you're explaining, it would keep the doors closed by itself. Without the pin. Without the driver having to put the pin in the ground.
Okay, we'll look at that.
So, how does the board feel about the brick?
Personally, I think it should be full brick. We always had problems with dumpsters. We never came, every time we approved something, it turned out to be crap. In reality, once we went with the full brick, it looks nice and it's maintained. Now we're sort of going backwards, in my mind, so that's my vote, full brick.
I agree, because if we say veneer, it's gonna be veneer from now on. because that's how these things happen.
How many enclosures are there altogether?
There's 8 buildings, there's 7 enclosures.
I kind of, at least I pick up on the applicant's, point of the aesthetics, that the brick is gonna match one of the buildings in the main building, so I'd say from a design standpoint, there's some, I find that, his reasoning is reasonable, and I would tend to go along with that. My thought is that if it's gonna put it on the building, and then obviously they expect it to hold up, I think it would be subject to seeing what the veneer is. I think we're probably borrowing on examples. There's probably some veneers that wouldn't hold up.
Well,
for
it
It's
would
an
be the
actual
same
brick.
veneer that we looked at,
Just cut
and,
in half.
yeah, it was the same thing. It would be the same brick, correct?
Aesthetically, you would never tell the difference. I think what Mr. Leon is talking about is durability. Is a thin brick, if it gets hit, gonna stand up better than a full-size brick? Maybe, but they're made of clay. They don't have any reinforcing in them. Garbage truck hits it with a dumpster, I've seen a lot of them, it'll destroy either or. It's the block and the bollards are what's gonna protect that dumpster enclosure. That's why the gates usually get beat up, because they hit the gate, and they get them off center, and then the hinges don't work.
Now, is it-
35 years, I've seen a lot of dumpsters, but again, yes, I think we're durability aesthetically, you couldn't tell the difference. If I didn't tell you it was thin brick, because it's made of the same material, you'd never know if you didn't watch it go up. But is it gonna last if someone backs into it? My point is, if they back into it hard enough, it's gonna wreck the regular brick almost as easy as it's gonna wreck the thin brick. And the thin brick can be replaced probably faster and easier. 'Cause it sits on a clip system, they come in, they put some new pieces in, they glue it back, and then they remortar it, you're done.
Is the veneer fastened with, masonry, with mortar?
Well, it sits on a, what's called the tabs panel, so it's a metal panel that's screwed through the block, and they have little tabs on the bottom that actually sit like a little seat for the thin brick to sit on, which is glued, it's a special adhesive, but then all the joints are mortared with real mortar, just like you would mortar a real brick building, with full bed. That's why you wouldn't know, the face of the brick is still a real brick, and they mortar all the joints, just like you would mortar a full bed depth brick. So by the eye, you would never know the difference. But if it gets hit by a truck, it's gonna crack the mortar, either case, and maybe would crack, but it's tight to the block, so it's not like there's an air gap between it. So I think either brick would get damaged if it starts getting hit by trucks. But as Mr. Keller says, the way these are located, they're now out in big wide open areas where these guys are gonna have a head of steam, and really start ramming themselves into these dumpster enclosures, like I've had in other shopping centers.
Batting
You
a
do
bomb
either.
or something.
And again, if I do a real brick, then I actually have to not that it's monetary, but I have to put a foundation in. It's gotta go down below the grade with the block and sit on a footing. Whereas a thin brick, it just sits, because it gets glued to the wall, so it doesn't need a footing.
You have a foundation for the other blocks, don't you?
Yeah, so the block is sitting on it.
So what are you talking about? You put it on.
It's the board's discretion, we'll do whatever you wanna do.
Does weather have an impact on either one?
No,
None at all.
no, because the glue has been tested to 0 degrees so I just installed these last 2 weeks. I have 3 jobs going where they're able to still put the adhesive on. They didn't put the mortar in, but they put the adhesive on. They're good till 0 degrees.
Is it possible to table and allow the final decision subject to
Sure.
supporting us with an example of it?
Well, we saw the brick last meeting,
It's-
correct?
It's the same brick, whatever they showed us beyond the main building, it's the same thing, just cut in half, so.
Also too, I want to note that on past applications, applicants have made requests for a brick look-alike veneer, and the board did not accept it.
We're talking about real brick.
Real brick. It's been real
Just
brick.
thin,
I'm sorry?
just thinner. That's what we're putting on the buildings, and that's what we're asking for the board to consider for the dumpsters. The main frame, structure of the dumpsters is the 8-inch concrete block walls, and then the brick is for aesthetics. It's not there for structure, it's there to make it look nice. There's bollards on the inside to protect an overzealous, garbage hauler from rolling that dumpster in too far, and hitting the block walls. That's why we put bollards on the inside.
I mean, my perspective is if we made some changes for more recently to have the full brick, then it would seem weird to go back on that, but I am more concerned about the gates. I feel like the gates are a bigger concern about the locking mechanism on the gates.
Mike, do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I mean, I would probably lean more towards the thin brick, personally. If what you're saying is true about the cinder behind, and it's just a facing, right, adhesive, and if it's tested, I'm an engineer, so I look at ways to do things better. And not necessarily saying that what we have before is not better, it's just that, to me, it makes sense. What you presented makes sense.
Me, I don't think you're deviating from masonry, even if it's a thin brick or a thick brick. I mean, masonry is masonry to me, but it's a half, it's a half. So
Jason, you have to speak into.
I don't think you're deviating from masonry if you're using a real brick that's cut in half. So it's more of a aesthetics than anything else. And I don't think it's going backwards because you're still using masonry and it's a brick, so.
But it still looks the same as everything else.
Yeah.
As the other
Correct.
bricks. That's what I thought about.
Okay, well, let's all think about it, and, before we get to the end, we'll figure it out. Do you have anything more, Liam?
A couple of things. I believe last meeting we talked about the EV parking spaces, and we discussed, I know these are make-ready spaces, you don't necessarily have to install them, but it makes sense to get the underground conduit in the ground before we pave these parking areas.
Correct.
And I know there was a discussion about whether that's a site plan jurisdiction, or electrical subcode official, but my point is, when we go to construction, unless it's on the plans, it won't get done. So I'd like to see the underground conduit to the EV charging stations shown on the plans. That way, well, Bill will not have to argue with the contractor what goes in the ground. It will be on the site plan.
Are you gonna have two, one for the first phase and then one for everything else?
Yeah, every EV space should have conduit going to it, and it should go into the building where the electrical gear necessary to service that is gonna be located in the building. So that's an architectural decision.
Similarly, we don't show conduits for the light fixtures. That is done by the MEP engineer, not by the site civil. I can put a big note on the plans that say that lighting conduit and EV charging conduit are to be installed. Well, I mean, lighting conduit, you can't turn the lights on if you don't have the conduit, but it's the same thing. Is we can put a note on the plans that EV conduit is to be installed as part of phase one at all of the make-ready spaces. I don't know where it's gonna go, I don't know how big it needs to be. There still is a planning discussion on the power requirements and everything else. So I can put a note on the plans, but today, sitting here, I can't tell you where that conduit's gonna run from. Now, my recollection is we have EV parking, EV spaces in the back across the drive aisle, and we also, yep, my memory hasn't completely left me. We have EV back here, over up against the building, so that's not too big a deal, and also in front. So, but where that conduit runs, I can't tell you, because that's outside the scope of my services. So, but I'm happy to put a note on the plans.
Is that also dependent on the type of EV charger you're putting in? Level one?
I don't think the conduit would be different. it may be the difference between, and I'm just using numbers, a 2-inch conduit and a 2.5-inch conduit, because a level 2 charger, that wire is probably a little beefier. But again, I'm not an electrical engineer. I try not even to touch steel outlets in my house. I call somebody a professional, and that is not me.
All right, as long as there's a note on the utility plan, use font about 5 times your normal size, put in a big box so it can't be missing. So we have the pre-construction meeting, Mr. Ryan can say, hey, where's the conduit going? I need a drawing before you pave the parking lot.
Not a problem.
Because I know how this goes in the field. It becomes a discussion with the contractor, put it that way. Now regarding the fire zones, Eric, have you had a chance to discuss the fire zones with the fire department yet?
I have not, no.
Okay. So that's 2 site plan design waivers that are being requested. It relates to the striping of the fire zones. And I think, I don't want to speak for the board, but I believe the board was of the opinion that the applicant should sit down with the fire department and discuss if they feel the fire zone striping is necessary and appropriate. So,
I think we've testified we'll comply with the fire commission, whatever he asks us
Correct.
for, we'll do.
well, I don't think the fire department's report discussed fire zones in the report, so I want to specifically address that, whether fire zones are gonna be added to the site plan or not, it can be based on a discussion and agreement that you'll have with the fire
That's
department.
fine.
And that'll be done as resolution compliance.
But, I mean, I had a question, so could we have that taken care of before we, approve any resolution, if that's the direction that we're going in? Again, what if the fire department is going to be eliminating a couple of parking spaces? Because they want more room for a turnaround or something like that?
Ms. Chairwoman, I mean, they've seen the plans, they've commented on the plans. They did not raise any issues about where we showed parking spaces. So I think it's a matter of how do they want the fire lanes striped. Every town is a little different, but my experience with fire departments is if they have a concern about parking spaces, they're not shy about sharing that. Our request is that is part of resolution compliance. If it materially changes things, then we have to return, but I don't, my professional opinion is that they're not gonna have us take out parking spaces, cause they've already seen the plan, and they did not raise that concern, in their review.
But if that were the case, you would have to come back.
Right, and we're gonna come back for every other building after A anyhow, so.
But we're approving the parking and the whole site plan here.
Correct, though it's preliminary for the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
with the understanding that we have to come back for final for every other subsequent phase. And again, show you that we provide enough parking for any modifications that happen to these buildings, when we actually have tenants and everything else. There are no tenants identified except for Weichert themselves, who will be in the 225 building. Other than that, it's open to the marketplace demand. Right.
Anything else, Leon?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Let's see. Eric, the 2 driveways going onto Johnson Road, I know you and I disagree on this.
Yes,
The most southerly driveway, you have it 28 feet wide.
correct,
In the northerly driveway, you have it 24 feet wide.
correct.
Why shouldn't they both be 28 feet wide?
Because the southern driveway, let me find the right exhibit, I think it's A2. Exhibit A2 dated January 15th of this year The southern driveway, again, I apologize, is part of the circulation system through the site, the boulevard, across Building B, up and out to Littleton Road. The northern driveway leads into a parking lot. So, it's no different, in my opinion, as both the site engineer and the traffic engineer, as any one of these drive aisles where the parking spaces are. So this is not part of a circulation system, and it's not necessary to be 28 feet wide. You know, we did add the sidewalk out along this driveway to Johnson Road, and you know, I don't want to add additional impervious coverage that I don't think provides any benefit to the motorists entering and exiting this site.
Well, to me, that's a driveway into your site and it services those three buildings at the corner, as opposed to a typical parking aisle, which is 24 feet. They're both 24 feet. And
Correct.
I would just think for ease of maneuverability, that driveway should, maybe 28's too much, can you get 26? But 24 feet is nothing more than a parking aisle. It's not, in my mind, an adequate commercial driveway.
Is that one way or two?
Two-way. It's two 12-foot lanes, so no different than a public street. I think 24, in my opinion, and we have a difference of opinion, as engineers tend to do. I think 24 is adequate. And it also allows us to have landscaping on the south side of that driveway to the drive-through lane for building H. On the other side, we have the curb line, we have a sidewalk, and then we have a retaining wall. And at the top of the wall, which is the drive-through lane for building D, we have a fence and a guide rail.
Is the sidewalk alongside D?
Yeah, the sidewalk, it does not show in Exhibit A2. The, it showed in the exhibit that I
Yeah, but
presented.
it runs along D side, it's the D
Yeah,
side.
it's on the north side of the driveway. And it's between the face of curb and the retaining wall.
And that's a drive-through along building D as well?
Correct. At this point, we are anticipating drive-throughs for buildings D, G, and H. And we will be back in future phases to discuss those individual buildings and the individual tenants.
Clay, do you have any questions on that? Leanne's question, or any discussion on it? I just have a concern that that's the first driveway and maybe people coming off Route 10 that didn't go in the Route 10 entrance would be going in there, but I mean, you can't go straight through, is that
No,
correct?
it leads only into that parking lot.
That one parking lot in front of building H.
Correct. It serves the parking area, and actually when you come in, you can go through to either one of these aisles, but it's really serving, you'd have to come in, jog, and go around to go to the other buildings to C, G, or F, whether it's to the south or to the north, so,
Does Harold have an opinion? Harold, do you have an opinion?
Yes, I heard this, comment before, and considering, what the plan layout is, as Eric discussed, I was fine with the 28, 24 widths as laid out.
I mean, technically, you don't need that extra entrance really, right? I mean, are you anticipating that one of those tenants, that would be advantageous to have like a third entrance to the site?
it does, it better distributes the traffic and does not cause people to drive through parking lots.
Okay.
You know, it's better, to not have, you don't want people, you know, human nature, they're gonna get into that parking lot, you know, I wanna go to that far end. Let them do it on Johnson Road and not in a parking lot where people are backing out or there's pedestrians. So, yes, I think it is important to have that second driveway on Johnson Road.
If I could just add something to that, and to what Eric's saying, if you didn't have that northerly driveway, the 24-foot width, on Johnson Road, the traffic oriented to this area, building plats E, D, and H, would be forced to use the left turn lane, when you come off Route 10, at that first intersection, would increase the, volume in that area, and also increase the queues in the left turn lane. By providing the northerly driveway, on Johnson, it allows people, I mean, if they come here, they're gonna get to know the site. If they wanted to go, for example, to buildings D and H, they would know they could just bypass the right turn in off of 10, come to Johnson, and just take a turn here, and just split either way to buildings D and H, as opposed to making the left at the other location and driving through a parking lot with the conflicts, with people backing in and backing out. You know, I myself, I would have used Johnson if I was familiar with the site.
But if you were coming in, you wanted to go to the drive-through in building D, that'd be a pretty sharp turn.
Yes, that would be.
I mean, I don't know that increasing the size of the driveway would make a difference, but
It would,
that's what,
and I think, you know, again, people who become familiar with the site, would, in that case, would probably come in off of Route 10.
Or you could reverse the one way.
Well, then you gotta reach across your car to get to the,
Okay.
drive-through lanes always have to be,
Okay.
counterclockwise. In the States, you know, in England or Australia, you would be able to reverse it, not the States.
Leon, do you wanna keep going?
Sure.
Okay.
Eric, in your January 19th response letter, in regards to the heliport,
Yes,
you said that the applicant has received DOT approval for the amended flight path.
correct.
Is that the one and only authority that has jurisdiction over that flight path?
Over the flight path, yes.
The FAA does not?
No, the FAA approves the helipad itself and its location. The flight path is controlled by the New Jersey DOT, Division of Aeronautics.
Okay. Could you submit a copy of that, please?
Yes.
Now, obviously, as part of that review, the DOT was sent a copy of their site plan.
I don't remember, because we did it a couple of years ago.
So,
They
so
were-
what type of an amendment did you ask for?
Well, the amendment, no, we did,
We showed
They would give it a plan.
We showed them the diagram of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
We'll send that to
Then-
you, yeah.
yeah, we'll send it, but the original flight path, looking at exhibit A2, came in on a angle from the northeast across, to the southwest to the helipad, and then the outbound is the reverse of that. And because of the location of Building H and other factors, that, flight path was changed to something a little bit closer to east-west, but not true east-west. I don't have a recollection of the specific heading associated with that, but it's in the paperwork, which we can submit.
My last,
Last was always east-west.
No, it was actually kind of a northeast, it was rotated something on the order of about 60 degrees, but don't quote me on that. I don't remember the exact, numbers. We prepared the flight path exhibit, for Weichert, but it said it was, a couple of years ago, it was after we started the conceptual plan. Yes.
okay. My last comment, and I think this will kind of take care of itself, it's really just a comment, is your soil erosion control plan shows for the entire site 20 acres of disturbance.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a large land area to be opened up all at once. So my comment in my January 11th letter was to have some type of phasing as it relates to land disturbance. Now, we have a phasing plan, obviously, for phase one, we know what that is. I think that's just under 6 acres of disturbance.
Correct, 5 point.
But that's something that the board and myself, I think, should keep an eye on as the future phases come in. I think it'll be okay. I can't imagine you're gonna, phase two is gonna be the balance of the entire site, but it could be. And if it is, we'll deal with phasing of land disturbance at that point. But I just, 20 acres opened up at one time, you're asking for a major event out on Johnson Road and Route 10 in terms of the soil erosion occurrence. But again, I think the phasing will take care of that.
I think Mr. Hall is correct. You know, phase one is just under 6 acres, and we have to come back to this board for subsequent phase or phases. And I don't know what the future will hold, but I'm sure we're gonna be back for more than just one phase. So, because again, remember, 1625 building does not go away until 225 is done. And at some point, we need to figure out what DOT is gonna, require. So.
That's it?
Liz, do you have any?
Yes. Okay, there are two fairly quick questions, I believe, and this goes back to, I think, some of your original testimony with regard to the hot box, the further utility. Would you agree to a condition that either you choose a dark color or green, or you paint it a dark color or green so that it is not reflective?
Yeah, I thought we had discussed that we would,
Not in the public hearing. You said that you would.
Oh, right. I knew we had a conversation about it. Yeah, we don't have an issue with, doing something to the, polished aluminum box so that it does not look like a polished aluminum box. We will only have one.
Okay.
We've gotten far enough with our discussions with Southeast Mars that they want us to reuse the existing vault that's up by the 1625 building. All of the backflow preventers and stuff that have to be above ground will be in building D in the utility room. The hot box that we will have is going to be down at the southeastern corner of the site. It will be screened, but we will also, treat the,
Camouflage.
yes, we'll camouflage it in some way.
Okay, and then, so another question I have is with regard to the helipad. And, I just have concerns that you're gonna have a lot of people coming to the site potentially for the first time or who are unfamiliar, which is a little different than it is now, I would think. And I'm wondering if you're going to have any signage or fencing to prevent any unauthorized people just going up there, or just to alert people that that is what that is, that it's a helipad.
No, we're in the heliport. I'll show you.
It's, I mean, we would not put fencing up because fencing is an obstruction. And there are 2 rings around the helipad that, you know, in the inner one, and I think it shows on the plan, it's 80 feet. You can't really have anything. And then beyond that is kind of a buffer zone. I think it may be appropriate.
I was thinking more like the fencing preventing somebody from walking up, not that there'd be fencing at where the helicopter's landing. Or at least signage.
I think, you know,
That's fine.
we can add signage.
Okay. Alright.
Maybe striping or painting, I mean, you don't think kids are gonna wanna go?
I mean, they could do it now.
But they're invited to the site now.
Yes, they are invited to the site now, and it'll be near the drive-through restaurants, which, you know.
Well, it is separated from building H by a
Right.
detention basin, so we do have a physical, separation to that.
So it's raised, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's raised
It's
about
gotta be.
so high above the parking lot that's adjacent to it. I mean, before that helipad went in, which it was approved around 1990-ish, after Weichert purchased the property, that parking bay used to extend through, so they just built it, you know, and cut off the northern parking area from the southern parking area. So it's, you know, about 4 feet above the grade. And there are a set of stairs that go up to it now.
So that was what I was suggesting, that people would be able to walk up the stairs.
So it wouldn't be attractive to skateboarders or?
No, it's flat and it's small, and, I don't think there's I'm not a skateboarder, or I'd kill myself. But to skate on that and then jump off 4 feet onto a parking lot doesn't sound like a lot of excitement. I don't know.
Just go to YouTube, they're all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
Anyway,
Those are my only questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you have another witness?
That's it. That's all we
Okay,
got.
so let's go through the board and you can ask the questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On phase 1 construction traffic. Where is that coming in and out of the area? Littleton and Johnson Road?
For, you mean the construction vehicles?
Yeah.
They would be directed to Littleton Road. If they do go out Johnson, it would be towards Route 10, but the intent is to, and I always say the intent because you never can control what a contractor may do, is that it would be towards Route 10 and preferably towards Littleton Road. We don't want them drive. We don't want them driving through the parking lot either. It's more direct to go out to Littleton Road.
Plus, it's a signalized control intersection.
Yes,
It absolutely
correct.
should be two.
That's,
I have a couple of questions and some clarification points. I
Yes,
think if you look at A2, I think the one that's up here is probably can see it best. When I was looking at this, if you were entering the site from the southernmost entrance on Johnson Road, and you go into the site and make a right, it looks like that's a pretty long straight shot. Do you have any types of speed bumps or anything along there? I'm concerned about potentially people just going pretty fast, especially up, maybe at night, going into the drive-through, et cetera. So just wanted to get some thoughts about that. I don't know if I misread the plan.
Well, in phase one, I mean, they would come in, they would make a right, they would make a left, and they would come through here. There'll be a stop sign at the end. I mean, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 400 feet. It's really not, when you design, if you have a road, you wanna put speed humps on it, the minimum spacing on speed hump is about 400 feet. So there's really no need to put it in here, within the parking lot. In the full build out, I mean, and again, this is something we could talk about in a future phase, is we could talk about taking this pedestrian crossing from building C towards the helipad and doing that as a raised pedestrian like we did in front of building A, so that you're favoring the pedestrian, and it creates a speed hump. Again, this distance, now take your scale. Thank you. Here it is, 20, 40, 50. Oops. So from the circulation aisle here to building H, it's a little over 300 feet. Something we can talk about.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you did it, that would be the logical place to do it.
Right.
The thing in a parking lot that you always have to be careful of is it's not like a speed hump on a roadway where you don't ever go all the way up to the curb line, so the drainage flows through. I can't do that here, so I don't wanna create a dam in the parking lot. So, but that's a good question. I'm gonna hold on to this for now.
I have a, should I just go through? Okay, so when I'm looking at building H and building D, if ideally, I suppose, if someone is shopping in building H and they wanna go over to building C, we would not like them to move a car. You would expect that they would be walking, traversing the parking lot. So it looks like in order to go from building H to get to like building G, you would have to cross over the drive-through and 2 lanes of traffic in order to get to the crosswalk over to building, to go over to building G. So I don't know if it is worth considering a different way of crossing over from building H to the other side of the lot, just something to think about. Because the only other crossing is to go by the helipad, and I don't know when anybody would be going that far to the left and then crossing
To
over
go
the
in,
parking lot.
yeah, from H to G,
Yeah.
our thought was you go across the inbound, the 2-way driveway, through the parking lot. The reason that we put it on the north side of that intersection is that there's an island there. So
Yeah.
just in case, it provides a refuge as opposed to crossing 2 through lanes and a left turn lane. And then you get onto the island, and if you're going to G, yes, you're gonna cross that drive-through lane, but that's not an unusual occurrence. And at that point, somebody's just picked up their food and they're gonna see, somebody in front of them. I think that's the most direct and appropriate route to take.
Okay, I just get a little worried about people coming out of a drive-through and having to go across that first and then the 2 lanes of traffic entering. So that was just something I picked up on it. Another question about, I guess they're the islands that are crossing over between the parking lots. It doesn't appear that there's any breaks in those islands. I know typically what I've seen is breaks in the islands. People tend to go to the easiest way to cross over. And I'm just wondering about, does it make sense to have some open areas between the dividers for people to walk through? Because I know landscaping and all that stuff tends to be really hard to maintain because people are just walking through the bushes because they want the easiest way to get across. So I don't know if I'm just missing it on the plans.
Ms. Steggert, I'm not sure exactly where you're talking about, because we have breaks in the parking bays at key locations. We have pedestrian pass across where there's islands and no landscaping in those islands, or just ground cover. So I'm unclear.
Sure, sorry about that.
That's
See
okay.
where
No.
block 171 is? So I'm just looking, yeah.
This?
Do you, yes, and so before the street, when you go, at least I'm on exhibit A2. I don't have that exhibit that you're looking at.
This is A2.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes.
Going, yeah, up from the ruler, are there breaks? Keep going,
There's
north,
a break in the parking bay for vehicles here. This is a pedestrian route here.
right.
We
To
didn't
the
put
left.
brakes in here because this part of the parking lot is really for building B. Building H may have some spillover down this way.
Okay,
But, you know, this parking here and in front of H is where this convenience parking is going to be. You know, what happens is you get E and D are competing for the same spaces, so it starts to filter down. That's why this whole area from this pedestrian crossing to building E is gonna serve those 3 buildings. And then the area from the pedestrian crosswalk to the southern driveway is your overflow for that area, and also the parking for the east end of building B.
okay. Okay, going back to our favorite building, building A. I know there's been talk about the daycare center being a child daycare center. It could potentially be an adult daycare center as well?
As long as it's permitted under the zoning, I don't know, we have not,
It sounds unlikely, but.
yeah, I don't, you know, we have not had a discussion or, you know, looking for that. The childcare is more conducive to the office use in the building and also the location of it, so.
Would there be changes that would be requested if it's goes from a child daycare center to an adult daycare center? I assume the area in the back, that recreation area would change.
We would need that,
Okay,
or it would be just a much smaller area because it would be more passive outdoor seating areas, which wouldn't necessarily have to be in the back, especially that the drop-off area is gone.
But Eric, it would impact your parking, cause right now, right, you're not counting to having a parking requirement for childcare centers.
We did.
You did?
Even though the municipal land use law says I don't have to, we did count it. So
Okay.
all of our parking numbers include a parking demand in accordance with the borough code
Okay.
for a childcare center.
Okay.
We wanted to be conservative. It's in my shared parking analysis as well.
and then just one more clarification. Just a clarification on those U-shaped plaza areas, are those, yeah, so I think it was called in the, between the buildings, like if you look at, building
Oh.
F, you've got those those
These plazas, yes.
correct. Are those, I think when, I think my understanding was that there would be some equipment that would be accommodated in there, but are those also dining and seating areas as well?
It depends on the tenants. They are, the plans as they are today that are before the board, have that whole area is just, pavement, because again, for stormwater, we took the worst case. Now, we did update the plaza for building A. It's smaller, it's configured differently, there are some tables and chairs. At this point, we don't know whether there's a restaurant in there or not. It wasn't anticipated, but it could be outdoor seating, yes.
Okay. And then we also talked about bicycle racks, which I know you guys
Which
want.
we've added.
Perfect,
They were in the exhibit that I presented 2 weeks ago.
perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
For the record, Mrs. Stecker did listen to the tape and signed certification
I did.
that
Right,
she
thank
did.
you.
You keep saying helipad, and I'm sorry, I missed it somewhere along, I have no idea where it is.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's so small, sorry.
Yes.
Okay,
It's
that's
this
good.
brown spot to
Yeah, I
the
see it
south
now,
of Building
thanks.
H.
Got it. But I have a question, going back to the bricks.
Yes.
What's the point of cutting them in half? I know you say it's about the same if anything hits it, but what's the
For the
point?
record, Mr. Dees is returning.
Thank you. Mr.
Starts with building A because that's the existing structure. If we were to provide full bed depth brick, we'd have to design a new foundation to support it. We'd have to put steel lintels across every masonry opening across that building. When they created and invented thin brick technology using real bricks, they glue on, they don't need to be supported by a foundation,
Okay.
and I don't need a steel lintel over every window opening.
Okay.
So when you start with that building, it's just easier to bring it all the way through, because with the new energy code, if we do a real brick, the walls become massive. Because we need the mandatory 2-inch air gap, 2-inch continuous rigid insulation, real brick, plus the studs. We're talking about a 19-inch thick wall versus something that's gonna be more like 11 inches or 12 inches thick. Still meets the energy code, but if we do a cavity wall, full bed depth brick, we have steel, we have foundations, and we have much thicker walls,
Okay,
which
thank you.
affects.
When you were talking about the gate, you used a word that starts with, I think it starts with a B, and it's something, it sounded like
It's a
boulder or?
Bollard.
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 Could you just tell me what it looks like? Can you, is it a,
Steel tube,
okay,
about
8
between
inches.
4 and 6 inches, or
8
as much
inches.
as 8 inches in diameter. It's filled with concrete. It's buried in the ground
Oh,
about
like
3.5 feet.
okay,
So if you've gone to the Quick Check
yes,
and seen those green sleeve
that's
tubes
it,
in front,
that's a bollard.
bollard.
Okay, thank you. I was reading about them today and I didn't have a picture, so you were using the word and I appreciate it.
Just go to the Quick Check
It's also
and
to
that's
keep,
what you got.
cars from crashing into some buildings.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, I know it's there. Yeah.
Snack stand
Right.
all the way around.
The minute you said that, that's what I
Yeah.
thought of. Thank you.
Ron, you have any questions?
You agreed that you're gonna redo the whole parking lot pavement wise, right?
Yes.
Just curious, mechanics of trying to do that seems to me be fairly difficult. How would you implement that with the fact that we have 2 phases, and how would you go about doing that?
It's not that unusual. I mean, especially for the first phase, I mean, for building A, there's nobody in that building, so when they finish with the building itself, or the majority of the building, then they put the curbs in, they grind up the asphalt, level it, install additional stone where necessary, then put down a base course and then top it.
So you would do topping in sections as well?
Yeah, I mean, as we went through the phases, it gets easy. I'm gonna go back to Exhibit A3.
That shows phase 1.
Exhibit A3, phase 1. Anything north of the helipad, there is no pavement to save, so we're just gonna build it brand new. The building B essentially goes into the area east of building A, So again, most of that is gonna, be demoed to put the building in. And then it just leaves this parking field, between the existing 1625 building and the proposed building B. So that would, at least in part, be done as part of building B. So it works out, in this case, really well. We've had some other challenges in doing it. It's a logistics exercise.
Thank you.
Jason, you have?
Most of my stuff's been answered along the way. I did have the truck traffic question. I did have the truck traffic question that you answered before. Each place is individually metered, right, each building, or space, or no? Water and gas?
No, well, water, no, because Southeast Mars,
Send a service to True.
yeah, there'll be, they may sub-meter it, but Southeast Mars is gonna send one bill, or two bills.
But each building will be individually service brought to each building independent. And brought to the landlord, in which are those boxes that connect building E, building F.
Right.
Those things. And then they can be sub-metered from there as the tenants go.
Right. Same with the gas, we're gonna do whatever public service wants, but that's why we set aside those, utility areas, in each of the buildings.
I have no other questions.
I would like to have a little bit better, I think, understanding of what we're doing at the grocery store. Because we talked about cart corrals and you said they weren't necessary because they're going to, it's anticipated that the tenant would hire people to collect the carts.
I think we indicated it'd be like a phase 2 issue when we knew who the grocer would be. At this point, we don't really know.
It depends on the operator. Some of the, remember, this is a small, food store. Some of the small food stores, and I'm not gonna mention any names because somebody's gonna hear that and go, oh, they're gonna be coming here? I'm not saying it.
Right.
They don't necessarily use exterior car corrals in the parking lot. If the tenant that chooses to come here wants that, then we have to discuss that with you. It would lose 4, maybe 6 spaces, because you're gonna do them back to back. And they're gonna be fixed, it would be more, well, they'll be fixed, so they're not sliding around the parking lot like they do at the Stop and Shop on my house in Sparta, where they move from parking space to parking space. But it depends on who the operator is and who, the tenant. So, we're just asking to defer that to when we come back for final for building C and explore that with you.
And we could have been preliminary at that point too, depending on what the
Yeah.
facts are, but.
Right.
But in terms of your parking analysis, it's gonna work, because we've gained some spaces, we qualified building A, when we got rid of the old drop-off
Correct.
area, so the math works.
Correct. It worked before we added some spaces, especially when we look at the ITE parking generation, as opposed to the borough code, but it works under the borough code as well. And we'd have to update that to say, okay, we lost 6 spaces here, does it still work? Or did we find 6 spaces besides the one that we found up by getting rid of the drop-off area?
So that would just generate a new variance at that time.
Right.
They would have to
Okay.
apply for straight up parking rates.
Also, with regard to parking, if there's no daycare, and I know everybody's hoping there is, it's certainly, could we add parking in the rear? Could we bank that area for parking and future parking?
You mean the area for the.
Where the play area is.
Yeah,
Actually, that's part of the existing parking lot. So if we
Right.
don't have a daycare, you would gain X number of spaces in that area by, which could be land banked, however you wanna do it, to be conservative, and the intent of the applicant is for a daycare. So we've taken it out, it's properly sized for a daycare center. If it doesn't go in, those spaces would remain.
And how about some signage to maybe encourage people that are working in that building to park in the rear, like Weichert employees or something?
Since they are the major tenant in that building,
Mm-hmm.
and two of the people are here, I think there will be especially with a retail center, you always ask the employees
Correct.
to park in the back or in the furthest reaches. It's more difficult when it's a fully retail center, but when you have a mixed building, it's a little bit easier to control employees.
Except for the salesperson of the month, Sue.
Right, that's right, they get that special
They get
space
that.
up front.
I think it's easier to really, you're closer to the building and getting in and out if you're in the back, I think, but that's just, okay. I think that's all my questions. Yes, Leon?
Just one follow-up question. Since you're applying for final for phase one, the uses and the areas that you show in the architecturals, that's what's gonna be approved. If you come in for a building permit and you change those tenants or uses or square footages, would that trigger a trip back to this board?
For phase one, I'm not
For
sure.
phase one final,
If what changes, the building changes?
not the building, if the uses change or the square footages of any particular use change, since you're getting final for a very specific set of architectural plans, if something changes in terms of use and square footage, is that a trip back to this planning board?
I would suggest the answer is no. If the uses are permitted, assume that, and the parking ratios still work, I don't see need to come back, because tenants can change over time, they just come back for site.
What if the
plan.
parking changes?
If the parking change requires a variance, that would be a reason to come back.
Well, if you just need one more space, that's an additional parking variance.
But I think in our case here, Eric, you can help me, we have so much parking available empty for phase one on the site.
Correct, the parking demand as we've calculated for building A is not satisfied by the parking that is currently behind the building, in front of the building, and immediately to the side of the building. I testified to the fact that the parking demands would be met by, again, using the exhibit A3, that the parking demand for this building based on the borough code would involve using some of the existing parking spaces on lot 45, where building A sits on lot 4501.
So that would require a shared parking agreement.
Yeah, and that's one of your
Right.
conditions,
Right.
absolutely. But otherwise, we have so much extra parking, 300 spaces will make a difference.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's a handful of more spaces, then it's just, there'd be a handful more spaces.
Yeah, I
just on the other
guess what I'm
side.
getting at is the applicant's requesting final site plan approval for building A. You have the architectural plans, you have a certain impression as to the tenants, the use, and the floor areas for each of those. And what the applicant is asking, I believe, is they want the ability to change the tenants, the uses, and the square footages without coming back to this board, as long as the board's comfortable with that. That's,
Or no tenants.
Well-
I would say that's very typical.
I know you have no tenants, but you have uses specified on your floor plans, correct?
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
as long as
So
they're
let's
approved
say,
uses.
let's say one of those uses you wanna change from a retail to a restaurant. Does the board wanna see that? This is final site plan.
Well, that would change other, well, it would change parking requirements and things like that, right?
Yes. It's just been my experience, when a board issues final site plan approval, and you have a set of architectural plans that you approve, that's what you get. That's my experience with final site plan.
Well,
Andy, have you any thoughts on that?
I think if they're gonna, I think they only have,
they only have to come back if it's gonna require a change in what they're building, or it's gonna require variance because they're insufficient on parking or insufficient on something else.
Is a change in the building square footage of a space?
Well, what if a retailer wants to use 2 of those spaces instead of 1? That's,
Doesn't change the parking analysis, retail is retail.
right.
Whether they're selling shoes or selling suits, or doesn't matter.
But I had asked, what if you don't get a daycare center? I had asked that the last time, and it's
Right.
something else.
Could be retail.
It could be retail,
Could be office.
because it's permitted.
Right.
You don't have to come back because nothing is changing. Is
That's our view, because the building is the same. We're assuming the footprint's not gonna change, the building is the building. And if the uses are permitted, we'll assume that as well, then the issue is there sufficient parking to provide the use for those different uses? And the answer is, there's plenty of parking for phase 1, so I don't
Right.
see any reason to come back to say we're changing to a different retailer, you know, it kinda comes out in the wash, so to speak.
Is there a real life example that we should be concerned about?
I just wanna hear Andy's answer first.
Yeah.
There are some municipalities, and where their ordinance has a requirement to get site plan approval, just on the change in tenancy, change in use, even if it's permitted. So it's something that the, North Plains could require. I think we're asking a hypothetical here. What if they do something, will they require to come back here? That's gonna require on exactly what they want to do in the future, and looking at your ordinance. We're kind of making hypotheticals with not knowing what they're gonna wanna do, nor exactly what ordinance provision is going to apply, and we're trying to tie that, and I think that's a little difficult.
So just to get back to my question, if the square footages change in building A from where they are now, does that
Are they talking
require
about square footage?
You mean the interior space? The building itself is not
Yeah,
changing.
building
The
itself.
total square footage
No,
would not
interior.
change.
Yeah, interior. You have 5,000 square foots, and now you wanna make 7,500 and
Right, I guess,
2,000.
I mean, my view is that
Is
doesn't
that
change
trigger
the
them
analysis.
coming back or not?
I don't believe that triggers a requirement in their ordinance for them to come back.
We do have a minor site plan change of use process. Checklist D, D1 and D2. I just want the board to be aware, you think you're approving these floor plans with specific uses and specific floor areas. Is that what your expectation is to see get built in the field? Or do you want to see it if they change that?
I'd want to see it.
Yeah.
But this becomes somewhat unwieldy to come back. I mean, even the office space we're detailing may change. Right now, we're showing how many offices, the office numbers, the configuration may change. We're gonna come back and show we have 12 offices instead of 16, if the square footage is the same. Let's say-
No, if your office space square footage doesn't change, I don't care. But if you're on your first floor and the daycare center goes away and becomes a restaurant, in my opinion, this board should see that. That's just me.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that too, or,
I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate. If it's straightforward, as you're saying, it would be probably one meeting.
Well, it takes several months to get here for the one meeting.
We've always tried to be accommodating.
No, you're very, I'm not suggesting you're not, but the process, file the application, get it reviewed, get the complete, get the notice, get a hearing, it doesn't happen in 1 month, that's several months to do that.
12 tenants, or 12 tenants.
It's just, it could be very unwieldy in terms of getting tenants who wanna get in right away. Of course, there's some things they wanna go, and we have to go through a process to change, a guy who's selling shoes to selling something else. It just seems like, if it's retail, it's retail.
and I don't.
Retail to retail is fine. Daycare center to restaurant, is that the kind of change you wanna just let happen, or do you wanna see that?
No, I
Simple
think
as
that's
that.
what we would wanna see,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, if the second and third story is all office, right? How
Correct.
that's configured, divided up, I don't know and I don't care. But if the second story goes half off, all office to half office and half gym, the board wanna see that? Yes or no?
I think yeah. I mean, obviously, the footprint of that building is not going to change.
No.
And I don't think it would matter to the board if one space was divided into 2 for retail, or 2 spaces were combined into 1 for retail.
If the daycare center became retail?
Or if the daycare was going to be in retail, okay?
So the issue with the restaurant, that's kind of the trigger?
The
for coming
restaurant,
back?
the gym, that,
Well, we already have a gym noted in the building. It's on the floor plans already. There's a fitness center in there. I think it's 5,000 square feet. That's already factored into the plan.
Next to the plaza.
Yeah.
Is there a minor site plan review process after that?
There is a minor site plan,
Yes.
change of use.